are watching Over the Back Fence, a conversation between friends. This is a production of Neighborhood Falmouth, and your conversationalists today include Jackie Pratt, Tom Savara, Grant Willis, Mary Pat McKenzie, Marian Bihari, and I'm Susan Laux. So this time we are going to talk about a subject you enjoyed, or I suppose one you abhorred, that could be possible too, in school. Could be elementary school, could be college. But take you back to your school days. What did you really enjoy or really excel at, or what could you not cope with at all? Everyone's thinking. Grant.
My first year at Andover, they offered a beginning French course, and I'd always wanted to learn a language, so I signed up for it, and I didn't know that it was going to be taught by la méthode directe, which is the direct method. They never use English, including the first day. So we all filed in, and the instructor came up to the front of the class and said, "Oh, bonjour, mes élèves." And we all looked at him and said, "Oui, oui, oui." That's all they could think of. And we went through that whole day. He was holding up a ball. Alors, ici, nous avons un ballon. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. This is terrible. It's worse than being a salesman. The next day, things got a little better, and I took 4 years of that method direct, and believe me, it was the only way to learn. But I cried myself to sleep the first few nights because it was totally like being dropped into a huge pool of language. But I enjoyed it, and I got a French prize at the end for speaking it so well. So I figured that first day was worthwhile.
Well, it sounds, when you're imitating being in the class, it sounds like you've got your French down. Do you still speak?
J'en ai étudié quelques années au lycée. Mais
I guess that means yes.
I mean, Mary Pat knows I'm faking it, but nobody else does.
Oh my gosh. Do you, Mary Pat, you're from Canada. Do you automatically know French?
No, but we had to take it at school from first grade on. And now they teach it immersive. We only had 1 day a week, Mondays, where we had to speak French all day. Other than that. And you had to be able to, if you stayed for lunch, you had to be able to speak at lunch in French, and, you know.
Oh, wow.
That's even worse. Going to lunch.
Not if you saw the food that was offered.
I love it. So who's next with the subject in school you enjoyed, Marian?
Well, I enjoyed biology, and I don't remember too much, but what I remember the most is we had to dissect different animals. Not really animals, but, and I do remember dissecting frogs. And I don't remember anything else, but I do remember having a great time in class. We'd all laugh and whatever, and the teacher would yell at us. We wouldn't do it in 1 day. It took a couple of weeks, so you had to put your frog in the refrigerator and get it back the next time. And it was, by the time the end of the semester came, I think there wasn't much left of the frog. But that's a good memory. And I've always liked biology after that. So that's what I remember about school. And my favorite, actually, subject at the time.
Wow, I would have never known that about you. That's great. That's very, I thought biology was tough.
And I also loved math. So concrete. I'm a very concrete person. So, and my son actually followed in my footsteps. And he was a math professor at Tufts University for a while. But anyway, Those are the two subjects I like the most.
Nice.
I still remember how the formaldehyde smelled on those frogs, and
Yes.
it would get on your fingers, and it was hard to get it off.
Yeah.
Just had it all day.
Mm.
And the
Did you-
fetal pig.
Uh,
Did you guys do fetal pigs?
No, you were in the
No.
Midwest. They must have had.
No,
one.
we did frogs and fetal pigs.
Fetal
Yeah.
cow.
And that smell, you're absolutely right, it was,
Mm.
ugh. Who else?
I'll tell you my favorite subject, which is so bizarre that because I really wasn't a math fan. I loved geometry. Absolutely loved geometry. I would ask for extra work in geometry.
Wow.
I would never miss a class. That was I don't know why I didn't like pursue something, a career or school in architecture or something, because geometry made me really happy. What made me really unhappy was Latin, because I didn't think Hannibal would ever get across the Alps with those elephants. I had nightmares about Hannibal going over the Alps, and I did a lot of, we had to decline the punishment at our school if you did something, against the rules, was to decline Latin verbs on the blackboard. And I spent an inordinate amount of time declining verbs on the blackboard. So Latin was not, maybe that's why I didn't like Latin, because it was punishment.
Hmm.
I spent too much time doing it.
Oh
At
my
least
God.
you didn't have to speak it in the classroom.
That's true. We did.
Maybe not in your classrooms. But
How to do spot translations though. And then weirdly enough, my oldest kid loved Latin, and at Falmouth High School, when he went there, he wanted to take it for more than 1 year. And they said, no, he couldn't take French and Latin, which were the banes of my existence in school. He wanted to take them, and you could only take one language. And if you took Latin, you couldn't take another one.
Oh, huh,
Which is weird.
Hmm.
that is weird.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's, I don't know if they even teach it anymore.
Yeah, they must, right?
And Hannibal must still be crossing the Alps.
No, he's on his way back. I
Really
think.
slow.
and Gaul is divided into 3 parts. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
So Jackie, how about you?
I liked almost everything, except for math. I'm terrible at it, and it's phobic. Because I discovered that if I got tutoring, if I got some help, that and I have an aversion to asking for help. I could pass tests and do all right with grades, but I loved, I loved almost everything else. I especially whenever there were clinical programs where you actually had to go out and do stuff, I liked that the best. And what probably the most interesting thing that I got to do is when I was in law school, the 3rd year, Louisiana had a program where they allowed 25 students to practice law on a limited license under the supervision of a professor. And I got exposed to all kinds of interesting things, but picture me with the blue blazer and the red, white, and blue striped skirt and my red, white, and blue striped briefcase at Angola prison in Louisiana.
Oh my God.
Here comes the judge.
Yeah. But it was the thing is that people were most of the prisoners were actually quite nice, except for one. But the thing is that I think they just felt sorry for me that I obviously was so out of place, had no idea what I was doing.
I love it.
But it was wonderful. It was wonderful, and it was lots of fun. Which sounds really odd, but because I think it's because of the variety of the experience, and because you actually saw how things played out in real life. but at any rate, that was that was probably the most interesting course I had.
Nice, nice. Okay, well, I'll jump in and say that I'm glad you guys went first because you made me think about all of these things. So I would say I really I enjoyed math. I enjoyed geometry much more than algebra, and I always sort of felt like people either gravitated towards one or the other, and I was more of a geometry than an algebra. Um, I did really well in chemistry. I wasn't a big science person, but I took a lot of really good notes in chemistry. And I guess, I wasn't always solid about doing my homework. I was kind of lazy. But
Mhm.
I took a lot of notes while I was in class, and somehow that saved my bacon more times than it should have. What I hated was history. And I was just like, why should we learn about what happened then? What's today is what's important. Now, of course, I'm like, now that I'm older, it's like, I'm really interested in history. I'm interested in ancestry and, how countries dealt with each other way back and how it's all still part of the same problems a lot of the time, all that stuff. But back then it was just like, oh, this is so boring. And I couldn't cope. Except I did have one history teacher that was super cute. And so my friend and I would always like be writing notes about, oh yeah, I think he's looking at me. No, he's looking at me. No, he's looking at you. No, whatever. That's about how I spent a lot of my misspent youth. Tom, you.
Oh, I'm having several thoughts here. One of them is what a bunch of geeks. We're all like, all about these subjects in school. And I have to say I loved every minute of school. I think in my life, I was a little sad when I finished school at age 30. And I said, I can't go back to school. I still have this thing in my head when it comes like May. I'm thinking, oh, I've got the summer off. And, when I was working that I was thinking that, and now I'm retired and I still think that it's just like I'm in the cycle of school. And yeah, I, um, I I thought I was hearing what you said about history, Susan, and I've often thought, and I've said to my kids, history is so fascinating, and it was taught in such a terrible way when we were
Yes.
young.
Maybe that's it.
Yes.
And there was no integration of the history of one thing with another. It would have been so fascinating to just take 1 year in the world, 1800, and look what happens across the entire world in that year. That would have been really interesting, as opposed to doing these little linear things, that they did. This is what happened in the U.S. and this is what happened in Europe and this is whatever. So I I was I was frustrated even as a high school student about how history could be done so much better than it was.
Mm.
It was bad. It was a terrible subject.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, too, you realize how potentially biased textbooks were. I mean,
Oh,
things that
right.
were just not even potentially biased, just, things that were lopped off, things that were sugar coated or omitted altogether. Yeah, and you realize that can still be happening today. That still is happening today.
Mhm.
It's
They
very,
probably still use the same textbooks.
yeah, it's very concerning.
Except in Texas, um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
where they rewrite them to fit the current mood of the political mood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're right, Tom. They didn't integrate like music of the time or art
Right.
time or anything that would like tie it together. Let's go to a museum. We're going to go see this. And then that ties into the period of history that we're doing, or movies or any of it.
Right, it would have been brilliant.
Yeah,
It would have been.
Well, I want to give Carnegie Mellon some credit. They have, for your first couple of years, their core courses, and one of them is a 2-year, 4-semester history of history of Western civilization. And they really did work in looking at economics, art, what was going on technically in science and also, and music. I mean, the whole, it was, and it may be that I just had a good professor. And I took a couple more, I took an American history course, and then I actually a seminar with him. But he was young, he was enthusiastic. And he'd come in with slides and back then he had a little record player. He played music for it, so that things became very interesting. So I've got to, I don't even remember high school history at all. I was trying to search my brain. But I know that the introduction I got at college, I really think they did a good job, because it covered, it gave you a better picture of history as it went along.
Well, and this is probably a topic for another time, but in another conversation I was in recently, we talked a lot about civics and how civics is no longer taught in the schools. And, with all of our recent, political upheaval, there was this, it's not clear that we're all singing from the same page. I mean, obviously people have different ideological views, and that's fine. But this sense of what is how civics works, how government works, is not clear to everyone. And we hold these certain beliefs to be self-evident, but they aren't evident to everyone. So anyways. So any other thoughts on school classes we had? Anything?
No, other than I had a question sort of to throw out to the group. We did live dissections.
Yeah.
We had to pit the frog, and I had a biology professor with a strange sense of humor. He picked bunnies for what we were going to do right after Easter break. That was what that was.
Sick.
Well, they've done their job delivering the eggs.
Yeah, now they're unemployed.
Out of work. You don't put them to work this way, they'll have a sales job.
Now time share.
Gosh, no, ours were all refrigerated. Ours like came in a carton, and like vacuum sealed, whatever,
Some of those too, but like the wormy things, the nematodes or whatever, some of that stuff.
I mean, the maggots?
No, the wormy things, but anyway, but they were all in formaldehyde, but again, he had a strange sense of humor, and he researched bats, and of course we referred to him as Batman, but if you ever had to go talk to him about anything, he had a refrigerator full of bats behind his desk. It was really bizarre. They were all upside down, curled up. Yeah.
That's what they do if they get into your house too.
I don't want to know about that.
Get into the house.
Yeah. Well, these may be a couple of discussions that we could have for a future day. What have you found in your freezer? What strange thing have you ever put in your freezer? Could be your jewelry, could be could be dead little Tweety or something. But anyway, on that upbeat note, Why don't we thank everyone for joining us today? I hope you'll come back for another episode of Over the Back Fence, a conversation with neighbors. This is a production of Neighborhood Falmouth, and we'll see you next time.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.